In this video, we're going to look at the capital quiz programming problem from your textbook, and we're going to work out some logic for the program, and then I'll show you an example solution to the problem. So the problem tells us to write a program that creates a dictionary containing the U.S. states as keys and their capitals as values. And it tells us that we can go to the internet and we can find a list of the states and the capitals. The program should then randomly quiz the user by displaying the name of a state and asking the user to enter that state's capital. The program should keep a count of the number of correct and incorrect responses. And as an alternative, if we don't want to do the U.S. states, we can use the names of countries and their capitals. But in this example, we're going to use the U.S. states and their capitals. Okay, so let's talk about the logic of creating this program. The first thing that we're going to do, and I'm just going to start typing some pseudocode here as we sort of work through the logic. The first thing that we're going to do is initialize a dictionary containing the states and their capitals. Now, there are a number of ways that we can go about doing this. You already know that you can go to the web and you can search for states and capitals. So you can either copy and paste such a list into a file and edit it in a text editor so that you have Python code that directly initializes a dictionary with the states and the capitals. That's one approach. Another approach would be to copy and paste that data into a text file and edit it in such a way that you can open the file with your Python program and you can read the entries, and as you read them you can store them in the dictionary. A couple of different approaches. Probably the better approach from a programming point of view would be to read the states and capitals from a text file. I think in this example I'm just going to copy and paste them straight into the Python program. But either way, that will work. So we're going to initialize a dictionary containing the states and their capitals. And then I think we have some variables that we're going to have to initialize because it tells us that we are to keep a count of the number of correct and incorrect responses. So we're going to initialize a variable to count the correct responses, and obviously we'll initialize that to 0. We're going to initialize a variable to count the incorrect responses. We'll initialize that to 0. And then, of course, we have to decide how many times we're going to quiz the user. How many state capitals are we going to How many states are we going to display asking the user for the capital? The problem doesn't tell us that, so let's just arbitrarily say that we're going to do this 5 times. We're going to show 5 states to the user asking for their capitals. So we're going to have a loop at this point, and I'm just going to, in the pseudocode, I'm just going to write this. I'm just going to say repeat 5 times. Now, obviously in the Python code, we're going to use something like a for loop, but whatever mechanism we decide to use, we're going to write a loop that repeats 5 times. So this loop, each time the loop iterates, the first thing that it's going to do is it's going to get a random entry from the dictionary, a random state and capital from the dictionary. Then we're going to ask the user to enter the capital for the for the state that we retrieved here from the dictionary. And then we're going to determine whether the user was correct. So we'll have some logic that works like this. If the user's response is correct, then we're going to add 1 to the count of correct responses, and we'll print a message indicating a correct response. Okay. Else, and I can tell that I'm going to have a little more room here. Okay, else, if the user is incorrect, this is going to kick in. Else, add 1 to the count of incorrect responses. Print a message indicating an incorrect response. And that's actually the end of the loop at that point. Okay. So now, after the loop finishes executing, then the last thing that we're going to do is display the results, and that is the number of correct and incorrect responses. Okay, so that's pretty much the overall logic of the program. So let's switch over to the Python editor, and let's go over the actual code. Before we look at the program in its entirety, I want to focus on a function definition. This is a function named state cap dictionary. So this function builds the dictionary containing the names of the states and their capitals. As I mentioned earlier in the video, I went to the internet and I searched for a list of the US states and their capitals, and I copied and pasted that list into my text editor, and I just edited the text to create this Python code which builds this dictionary. And as you can see, the dictionary has for each entry, the key value is the name of a state, and the value is the capital of that state. So I have one entry for each state. Now, you might agree, after we've gone over the logic of this program, you might agree that the most difficult part of the program is the process of copying and pasting all of this text, because the program itself is really pretty simple. Now, this function simply creates this dictionary, and it assigns it to a variable named sc, which is local to the state cap dictionary function. And then after it's built the dictionary, then it simply returns a reference to that dictionary. So now let's go up to the top of the program and look at the rest of it. So first we have this global constant num states, which is set to 5. I mentioned earlier we decided arbitrarily that we would quiz the user for 5 states. So this constant controls the number of times that we quiz the user. If we want to change the number of times we quiz the user, we simply have to change this constant. Inside the main function, here we call the state cap dictionary function. That's that function we looked at just a second ago that builds the dictionary of states and capitals, and we assign the resulting dictionary to this variable, state caps. Then we initialize a couple of variables. Correct, this is going to keep count of the number of correct responses. Incorrect, that's going to keep count of the number of incorrect responses. We initialize both of those at 0. And then we have a for loop that will iterate 5 times. And we know that is going to work because the loop says for count in range, and then we pass num states as an argument to the range function. Num states is 5, so we know that this loop will iterate 5 times. Inside the loop, the first thing we do is get a random entry from the dictionary. Now, if you've read if you've read this chapter closely in your textbook, you'll recall that a dictionary in Python has a method named pop item, and the pop item method randomly selects an entry from the dictionary and it returns that key and value. And so you see over here on the left hand side we've got state, comma, capital. So it returns the key and the value. So after this statement executes, the state variable will reference the name of a state, and the capital variable will reference the name of that state's capital. It's the key and the value. So next we're going to quiz the user. We print this message, what is the capital of, and we print the state, and then we wait for the user to enter their response, and that is referenced by the response variable. So now we're going to see if the user is correct. We have this if statement, if response.lower is equal to capital.lower. Now, we're converting both of these to lowercase so that we can ignore any inconsistencies in capitalization. So if these are equal, then the user is correct. So we add 1 to the correct variable, and we print this message saying that they're correct. Otherwise, we add 1 to the incorrect variable, and we print this message saying that the answer was incorrect. So this loop will iterate 5 times, and then after the loop has finished, we print the number of correct responses and the number of incorrect responses. So that's the main function. There's just 2 functions in this program, main, and then this function we saw earlier, the state cap dictionary function. Down at the bottom, we have this statement that calls the main function. So let's compile and execute this program and see how it works. Okay. All right, so the first state is Mississippi. What is the capital of Mississippi? Well, that happens to be Jackson. The next state, and I'm correct. The next state is Oklahoma. Now I'm going to make sure that I get both some correct and incorrect answers. So I know that the capital of Oklahoma is Oklahoma City, but I'm going to enter Bismarck instead. That's incorrect. What is the capital of Delaware? Okay, well, that should be Dover, which is correct. And I'll enter one more incorrect. It's asking me for the capital of Minnesota. The correct answer would be St. Paul. But I'm going to enter Michigan's capital, which is Lansing, and that's incorrect. And the last question is what is the capital of Illinois? And well, that would be Springfield. And we're correct. So let's make sure that it tallied everything properly. It tells us that we had 3 correct responses. Okay, there's 1, there's 2, and there's 3, and 2 incorrect responses, and there's 1 and there's 2. So I believe the program is working.